Oh. Should be good. Perfect. Okay. Oh, it's a scroll. Okay, gotcha. Okay. Well, hello, everyone. I have to say I'm very happy to be back at the podium after such a long interval. So this presentation is about something that the council has been asking for quite a while, which is a registry for foreclosed and vacant properties. So what is the problem with those? Well, obviously, properties which are poorly maintained or not well tended to devalue the neighborhoods they're in and affect the community as a whole. Foreclosed and vacant properties are a set of properties that are often not well maintained or are not being addressed easily because we don't know who owns them or who is managing them, exactly where they are, when they become vacant, when they become foreclosed, all the rest of it. Identifying and registering these properties is something which poses a significant challenge for city staff along a lot of different reasons. One, simply lack of time. Other, a lack of ability to really pull together the data. It's a whole bunch of different challenges. And trying to then do any sort of enforcement following that would also be very difficult to accomplish. So, in order to address this, staff put out an RFP seeking assistance, basically looking for an entity which could help with the registration process so that staff could be just tasked with doing enforcement. We put out an RFP, and our sole respondent was a company based out of Florida called ProChamps, or Property Champions. They are a leader in the country for this kind of task, handling registration of foreclosed and vacant properties for hundreds of different cities, many here in Illinois, but across the nation as well. Basically, in a partnership with ProChamps, they handle all of the registration work, hunting down that data that we may not have the time to find, and then handling all of the fee collection and the rest of it, leaving city staff with the responsibility of just going out and doing on-the-ground enforcement. On the call with us this evening is Stan Urban from ProChamps, and at this point, I'm going to kind of hand it over to him to talk about sort of how ProChamps works, kind of the process for onboarding with them, the scope of the work, and the rest of that. So, Stan, are you on the line?
I am here.
Okay. Can you see the screen as we see it?
You can see everything that says how ProChamps works.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I will just click on as you talk.
Okay. And if I might introduce myself, first of all, thank you to the mayor and the council for offering us this opportunity. A little history of myself. I am a retired city manager of 20 years. ProChamps found me at my last job opportunity. And they were heaven because trying to track down who owns a property, their name, address, phone number, email, and the property management company that was hired by this firm was another headache. We do that, and that's all we do. We provide the city with as much information as they need to create enforcement. It's very simple, and I'm sure at some point someone at the board is going to ask, what's the catch? There is no catch. I thought there was when they first approached me, but there is no catch. It is very simple. We secure and provide all the names, addresses, phone numbers, and emails to the property owners, meaning the banks. We provide the same information for all the property managers that are hired by the bank to maintain the property and any asset managers that are hired by the banks. We provide names, addresses, phone numbers, and emails to all of those people on a web-based program. I think that's important to note, that we do not interfere with any of your server space that you have now. Everything is accessible online through our web-based program. And I might mention, whether you have one person have access or you have over 300 people access this information, there is no charge. There is no charge at all for this information. You might ask yourself then, well, how do we make money? It's very simple. And if you could go to the next page, how is it paid? We are neutral general. We are probably the only vendor that's going to come before you in recent times and in the near future that is not going to charge you any money. We charge the banks. It's that simple. You will need to pass an ordinance that will say, if you initiate a foreclosure or own a vacant property within the city of Rock Island, you must register with us. You must give us all that pertinent information, which we post, and you must pay $300 twice a year. Some folks may ask, why not just charge $600 once a year? Because these properties are changing hands daily. Not weekly, not monthly, but daily. One day, Chase Bank owns it. The next day, Wells Fargo owns it. The next day, Fannie Mae owns it. The next day, another bank owns it. So we have to stay on top of these properties on a semi-annual basis. The fee that you're going to charge that we recommend is a $300 registration fee, semi-annually. We collect the $300, we collect the information, we post the information so that all pertinent people within the organization can identify this information. We keep $100 and we send $200 every month for every registration to the city of Rock Island. Does that make any sense to anybody at this point? Considering there are no questions, I would ask that open it up to questions at this point to the board.
I've got a few questions. Are we at the, we're at the end of the presentation? Mm-hmm. Okay. First, so we are going to be required to pass an ordinance that enables this, basically. And I assume within that ordinance, we will have to define what a vacant building is.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
Is there, I imagine that's a more nuanced conversation for a later day, such as if you have, like in our downtown, if you have residents on the second floor, but the storefront is vacant on the first floor, is that a vacant property? I mean, how are those types of nuances? Or what if somebody owns a residential rental, and they just don't want to have a tenant for whatever reason, but they maintain it. They keep the grass mowed. They don't have that negative effect to the community like you talked about. Is that considered a vacant property?
Yeah, and I don't know, Tim, can we turn off the slides so that we can see people's tiles, just so we know? Is that possible?
At this point, if I might add, we do not consider any rental properties as vacant at this point. We will come back in 2 to 4 weeks, maybe 6 or 8 weeks, after we have proven how we can identify foreclosure and vacant properties, and then we will identify rentals at that point, number one. Number two, if it is a vacant property, it is up to the board to decide what is considered vacant. And in most cases, what I have found in Illinois, 90 days or more is considered a vacant property, because as several communities have identified, there are a lot of big boxes that sit with vacant properties because they are using it as a write-off for taxes, or they're using it because they're still collecting rent even though it's empty. we need to go after those, or I should say the city of Rock Island needs to go after those to entice the landlord to occupy those with a tax-bearing property. We do not specifically identify or want to identify vacant properties. We are more involved with foreclosures, but we will identify vacant properties as well. It's up to you and your staff as to how you want to enforce vacant properties.
Yeah, and to kind of add on to that a little bit, we have an ordinance that we're working on right now that clearly defines all of those different things and establishes some of those perimeters and understandings. So the council will be seeing that all spelled out in more detail in that ordinance. As Stan pointed out, ProChamps will pretty much enforce whatever version of that we choose to adopt. So we can kind of tailor it to whatever the needs of our community is. And define things how we wish to define them.
Yeah. Okay. Next, is this able to define like certain requirements for foreclosed or vacant potentially buildings, like winterization requirements? How can that piece of the puzzle be a part of this whole deal? Because we want to make sure that if you have an abandoned or a foreclosed or a vacant property, that it's properly mothballed so that hopefully in the future somebody can take it over.
So a lot of that will already be covered by some of our property maintenance requirements that are already on the books. What this would allow us to do is really coordinate all of that enforcement better. Because part of the problem now is we don't know where to go looking. Right, to make sure that those things are being enforced appropriately. This would help us. If we know, there are all of these foreclosed properties we've never visited, because we keep track of all of those site visits in our current system, we would be able to then go and check and see whether or not things were in good condition. Are we going to require anything excessive beyond what we would already require? I don't think that's necessary. Really, just enforcing the current property, maintenance requirements we have would be a substantial improvement.
Okay.
If I may add to that also, when someone receives a letter to their household that says you are going to be foreclosed on in the next 60 or 90 days because you've missed one or two payments, we're not notified. We don't know those people. We only know when the courts have been received a document that says we are initiating foreclosure. That's when we register that property. We don't go after pre-foreclosures, as they're so commonly named, unless they notify us. And surprisingly, many banks do notify us of pre-foreclosures. But we notoriously only go after the documents that have been filed with the court in your county that says we have initiated a foreclosure.
Okay, last question, and this one is probably for our guest. Do you know of any municipalities or local governments, maybe specifically in Illinois, that have faced legal challenges to participating in this? Any cities that have been sued or anything because of this?
I'll take that a step further. Nationally, we have over 250 municipalities. Locally, meaning Illinois, we have over 40 communities, none of which have ever been challenged.
Works for me.
Are there any other council members that have questions?
Yes, this is Alderman Spurgettis. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have one question. If I have a constituent that contacts me and says there's a vacant property in their neighborhood, what do I do with that information?
So
we have what is called, I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, you're fine. Go ahead, Stan.
We have what is called a discussion or a obligation to discuss a property. We will ask them to provide us with what they described as a vacant property. We then submit that to a point person that would be designated with the city, and it is up to them to decide whether we proceed or we dismiss. It's up to we are nothing more than your hound dogs. We are a collection agency for your ordinance. It is up to you to decide whether we would pursue that property or not. In many communities, maybe not Rock Island, I don't mean to be nasty, but you probably don't have a lot of snowbirds, but maybe you do. And they'll say, well, I'm going to be vacant for the next 6 months. Well, then prove to us that you're going to be vacant for the next 6 months. We supply that information to the point person designated by the village, and we say, what do you want us to do? And it's up to the village ultimately to decide, not us.
Well, Miles, I'm asking you this question. Do I contact you to say there's a particular address that's been reported to me to be vacant?
Mr. Spaghettis, I'm sorry, we kind of missed the first part of what you said. Can you repeat?
I'm asking if a constituent calls me with a complaint of a vacant property, do I relay that information to you? Who inputs the information into the system?
You would be contacting the inspections division at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I don't know if Stan mentioned it, though it was in one of the slides. You know, when we enter into agreement with ProChamps, we'll have, I believe, 2 ProChamps staff members who will be assigned to the city, who we will have our staff coordinate with in all of these sorts of things.
Okay. I seem to recall seeing something about an interactive system, and I don't remember.
Correct. So that'll be what staff interact with. So right now we use a system called Govern. It's basically a database of different information that we keep all of our property inspections data in. There will be a ProChamps interface as well that our staff will have access to. So on the back end, they'll be able to go in and see all of the different data that ProChamps has collected. There will also be a public portal for that, so that if people are going to go and register their own properties, they'll be able to do that as well. It'll basically be like a web page.
Do any of the other aldermen have questions?
Yes. I want to touch back on something that Alderman Parker commented on earlier about the rentals, and maybe I misunderstood or misheard, but was there a comment, or did someone say that after we entered this agreement there'd be a time? So why? I guess why is that all not put into place going into this? Why is there that lapse of time that's needed?
I can comment on that. So. We went out we sent out an RFP that covered both foreclosed vacant as well as rental property registration, okay? Because we wanted to know what ProChamps had to offer for rental property registration as well as this other thing that the council had asked for previously. We are currently working with them on a second ordinance that would address rental property registration. That has more moving parts to it, though, so we would like a little more time to work out some of that with them and present that to you separately sometime in the next couple of months, hopefully. So the idea would be basically all the same with slightly different fee structures. Obviously, in the case of rental property, there's a difference between a single unit rental like a house, a multi-unit building, a property like the one I live in, which has commercial below, apartments above. So there's just more moving parts for that. We will come back to you with that when it's ready. So there would be 2 different service agreements with ProChamps. One is for this foreclosed vacant property registry, and then there would be an ordinance that would go with that. And then there would be another service agreement for the rental properties and another ordinance with that, if that makes sense. Okay. So we just decided to break it apart because it's easier to talk about it as 2 separate things.
Okay.
But we went out to RFP for both.
We would like the opportunity to prove ourselves that we can do what we promised to do for foreclosure and vacancy and come back for vacant property. And it is a little more detailed, as the staff member just alluded to. It's a matter whether it's short-term rental, long-term rental, multi-rentals, meaning more than a 2-flat or a 4-flat or a 6-flat. Those are things that still need to be kicked around the house a few times before we would jump in and say we can do it.
I understand. That all makes sense. The thing that does, I mean, you said that 6 or 8 weeks would prove yourself. I personally think that's kind of a short time window to prove yourself, but I do understand the idea of the splitting up. Thank you.
Any other questions out there?
Yeah, I had a quick question for Miles. Miles, let's say the city council agrees to move forward with this. How long do you expect for the ordinance and everything to take effect? I know you can't give me a solid answer, but just about how long?
Do you mean when we would bring an ordinance before you?
Yes.
I have an ordinance that I'm prepared to bring at the next council meeting.
And if I could add to that, once the ordinance is passed, we are ready, willing, and able to provide the services that are promised within anywhere from 48 to 72 hours.
Does there need to
Thank
be
you.
a public hearing for an ordinance? This is Keenan.
No, it
Or,
just needs to be passed in public, just like any other ordinance, but no specific public hearing for this.
Ivory, did that answer your question?
It did. Thank you.
Yes.
One follow-up question on the comment made about property owners who just sit on empty buildings for tax write-offs. Does a $300 fee really incentivize them not to get thousands of dollars written off their taxes? I mean, is there an option to make that a bit more costly?
If I may interject, there are several communities that have tried to get more money, but they run the risk of being challenged in the courts. We feel that if we do twice a year, $300, you won't be challenged in the courts.
Okay.
Very good. If there's no further questions, we'll move to the next topic.
Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stan.
All right, next up is the district discussions. Chief, you kicking this off? I don't know. Oh, okay.
Okay. City manager asked me to put together some information regarding a timeline of events that have occurred in the district over the last few weeks. We have what's up on the screen. I have a little more details that I'll go into. First, bars reopened on the weekend of the May 29th and 30th with I guess on a limited basis. And then the same thing on June 5th and 6th. On neither of those weekends did we experience any significant problems, other than there were some concerns brought forth about social distancing in the pandemic, which was basically non-existent when you looked at it. The first significant incident that we had occurred on the weekend of June 13th and 14th. June 14th, we had a aggravated domestic battery arrest in the district in which a male subject was seen choking a female and then throwing her to the ground. As that subject was taken into custody, he began to become passive resistant and then eventually became active resistant, where he was thrashing around and attempting to headbutt the officers. At that time, a large crowd gathered around the officers and were demanding that the suspect be let go. Additional officers had to be called in to help control the crowd. They had to push several subjects away to create some distance as those individuals closed on the officers. The on-duty watch commander sent an email about the overnight activities and indicated that throughout the night there was threatening behavior from the crowds. They were attempting to incite violence against the officers. They were also attempting to bait the officers into confrontations. And again, social distancing was non-existent. We fast forward to the following Monday. The mayor, and I can't speak specifically, but the mayor approached all the bars asking about voluntary compliance. I believe closing at 1 a.m. Is that correct, Mayor?
Correct.
And I think most bars did adhere to that. June 26th and 27th, a significant incident that probably most of you saw that was on social media. involved the attempted arrest of a federal fugitive who then was in a motor vehicle parked in the parking lot next to the daiquiri factory. He ended up throwing his car in reverse, ramming his way out of a blocking squad car and striking multiple vehicles in the process before he fled south on 18th Street, during which time he narrowly avoided striking several pedestrians. After that occurred, there was numerous disturbances that occurred throughout the district, required officers to utilize OC spray to break up the crowds. Arrests of individuals were met with crowds, again, attempting to pull prisoners away from the officers, grabbing onto the officers, threatening the officers, and it got to the point where we had to request mutual aid from Rock Island County and the Illinois State Police, who responded. On July 3rd and 4th, we had a disturbance that started inside the Black Sheep Tavern, involved multiple subjects fighting, throwing chairs and tables on the patio area. Eventually, the officers had to deploy OC spray in that incident, and throughout the investigation, they determined that 2 people had been stabbed. A suspect was arrested during that incident. July 4th and 5th, they had a large disturbance near Arts Alley, which led to a shots fired, in which an individual sustained a non-life-threatening gunshot wound to an extremity. Officers ended up pursuing a vehicle that was fleeing the scene, pursued it into Davenport, before they eventually took 3 subjects into custody and recovered a firearm. That investigation remains ongoing, and we're coordinating with the Iowa side with the state's attorney's office. July 10th and 11th, bars were closing at 2 a.m., and we did not have any issues then. City manager asked me to put together some graphs, which I believe you haven't been provided to you. Basically, there's 2 different graphs, a line graph and a bar graph, that show 2018, 2019, and 2020. 2020 only being the time that the bars have since reopened this year. Basically, what they show, and I would suspect if you went back in history and looked at the last 20 years, they would show the same spike that we see. Calls for service begin to increase significantly after 1 a.m. They peak between 2 and 3 a.m., and then they begin to decline. Attached to this graph also is the calls for service, the specific calls for service that were in the district area, broken down by hour and then by total as well. I think what's important to gather a couple things from these graphs. If you were to look at the line graphs, you can see even at 3 a.m., almost consistently, our calls for service then exceed 1 a.m. Calls for service, and that's pretty consistent. So the demand on our services remains high throughout that time. And I think it's also important as you look at these calls that are broken out, you cannot look at them on a one-on-one type call. You can't quantify a barking dog complaint the same as you could a disturbance. A barking dog complaint would typically only take a single officer responding. What we typically see and have seen historically in the district is these type of calls for service require almost all of our police officers to respond, leaving basically the rest of the city unprotected. I can say that with the incident that occurred on July 4th or the 5th, the shots fired, we had 1 car that was available for the rest of the city while every other car was tied up in the district. And this is not uncommon. Even on a relatively calm night, it requires a huge amount of police resources to police the district from 1 to 3 a.m. We have some significant concerns about the safety of our officers and the demands that are being placed upon them. I know there's been some questions that have been talking about crowd management. I don't see this so much as a crowd management situation, but the crowd dynamics have changed. When you have concerted efforts to incite violence against officers and people that are also physically grabbing onto officers, trying to pull prisoners away, I think we've entered in kind of a new era, which has caused me a lot of concern. So that's what I have. I have questions specifically for me.
I don't have any questions, but just on the clarification, I think people, the council members have seen this, but a few things you talked about each one of the weekends and the different situations that happen. But with that, you talked about the 1 a.m. close and it's voluntary by the bars and the restaurants out there. But also then starting July 3rd, we did another thing, change, put up barricades, working on closing street traffic. We did not have gates for people to check into, but through. But we did put up some barricades just to stop the car traffic, to give more people more room to social distance, along with being able to potentially control the area a little better. And then starting this last weekend, we kept those barricades up, but then added 4 different entrances like we do in a lot of the festivities, and had 2 people posted, one civilian called a bouncer, called a door person, and a police officer at each one of those entrances, carding people, wanding people for the, as best they could, to try to make sure there was no underage coming into district. And so those are also the changes that happened along with that. And so when we put each one of those processes, just doing the barricades did not stop one of the fights that happened down there. But when we did do the gates, that did change the atmosphere down there as far as underage and some ruckus going on. Just clarification of that.
I'll agree that the additional lights and the barricades that were added down there and controlling the entrance and exit probably had some positive effect on the district. I did go back and I looked at some of the video from downtown over the weekend. I will say that the crowd appeared to be pretty small comparatively to what it had been in the past, and we didn't experience any significant issues in the downtown. So that is true.
That is correct. I just wanted clarification, not to dispute anything or debate it back and forth, just showing these different stages of changes that have taken place with that. So that is there. So now, if there's any questions of the chief, please. I didn't mean to interrupt that.
I would like to make a comment, please. First of all, thank you for doing such a great job under difficult circumstances right now. And I know our manpower is a little bit diminished. So again, first of all, thank you for that. Second of all, Chief, could you, for the people that may not know, could you talk about the expense that is incurred to man those 4 stations, just so that people are aware of the cost that goes into putting those officers at those entrances?
Well, I can't speak specifically, but it is on an overtime basis, so we're paying officers at time and a half, and 4 officers plus a supervisor down there to oversee the overall operation. So I don't have a specific dollar amount, but it's not free, that's for sure.
Okay. Again, thank you very much.
I want to, once again, we continue to ask questions about the data, because I think that's one of the key things we have here, so I don't want to stop that. But at the same time, I do want to thank the bar owners down there for their help down there in making adjustments. Both the 1 o'clock voluntary time, 2 o'clock, we had some debates and heated discussions about that. But they also put a lot of physical labor and dollars into some of these changes themselves. So I want to thank them, and the two-way communication. I think that's been great. We've been both, I know myself and a few other people, but communicating on a pretty regular basis these last several weeks, trying to refine and change and talk to make sure that we can work a happy solution with everybody. So thank you. But if there's questions out there on that data, those bar graphs, I think there's some interesting facts there. If there's any questions on that information, or
Chief, one more. We talked about there was only one available officer. I'm not sure what weekend that was, the weekend of the stabbing, I believe. But was it also the same thing that occurred the night we had the vehicle that was ramming the vehicles? Was it the same situation, one car manning the rest of it?
I would assume so, because that was to the point where we had to call for additional assistance from other agencies.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to invite, would either of our downtown business owners like to contribute anything to the discussion here tonight, or are you just here to observe? You're welcome I would welcome your comments this evening. Okay. Can we have them come up?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. Okay.
We came because in case you had any questions about it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. You two put a lot of effort in and work, so that's.
Agreed.
But
Yep.
I know that you two are shy and don't like to talk, so.
No, anyway, so if you don't know me, Kyle Peters, Daiquiri Factory. Been here 16 years, so definitely been working with the mayor and the city manager on trying to come up with a solution. We're definitely, I think we all have the same common goal. You know, we want to have a vibrant downtown. In the 16 years, I know the 3 a.m. has came up. It's came up several times. So it's not the first time we've discussed this. We made great strides. I think the last 3 or 4 years, we made some really good strides. It was really starting to look really good. And there's a series of things that have happened with the loitering group that hasn't, in my experience, it's not going to go away until there's a place for them to go. Honestly, that's what it's always been like this. And there's been establishments or areas that cater to that. Unfortunately, both that I know of offhand are closed at this point. And it seems like by default they keep coming back. That's why we suggested doing the bike racks and stuff like that to try to do a checkpoint, which did have a good impact this weekend. Just from working the plaza both days, open to close, the amount of people that showed up and said, hey, you know, we don't want to go to the bar. We're just here to hang out. And I'm like, bingo. That's exactly why we did this. So it was working. I mean, it's like there was a lot of people that would come around on North 18th Street by Icons or down by Billy Bob's coming from parking garages or on the south side of 18th that would turn the corner and see the 2 staff members and an officer there, and you would just watch them turn around because they knew they're like, whether they wanted to show their ID in front of with an officer there, it was deterring what we wanted to deter in my eyes, you know. So the only thing I would suggest, honestly, like just to keep in mind before we make any permanent decisions, is just, you know, we can always extend the 2 a.m. temporary close for a while if we want. You know, we don't have to make anything permanent right now. That's all I'm saying. I mean, I ran our numbers for 2019, and for me, you can't really just look at 2 to 3 from 130 to 3. I think is fair to say, and I mean, it's a 6-figure number in sales. So it is, and I get both sides, but there is a huge economic impact that this is going to take. So just something to consider. I guess you can always, the climate's very unique right now. And it seems like all the states across the country, it's not just Rock Island or the Quad Cities, everybody's having issues with this type of stuff. Police brutality is terrible. I mean, I would never want to be in his shoes or any of the officer's shoes right now. It's not a good time to be an officer. But I think, you know, making a harsh, rash, permanent decision, I don't know. Maybe just think about potentially, you can always extend it, you know, and we can revisit it at a later time. So that's the one thing I would suggest or request, you know.
Terry, anything? Or
I opened up a few weeks after. Well, I'm Terry Tilk. I'm the property owner, 1815 Second Avenue. I own the Rock Island Brewing Company in Second Avenue. I opened up a few weeks after the other bars did. Second Avenue to the state, we still haven't opened up yet. So when I got back to town, Kyle told me there was a couple of rough weekends with crowds just hanging out downtown. So I think a lot of the people downtown have worked trying to make it better. I even suggested to the mayor about closing an hour early for some of the bars because Kyle told me he had already started doing it, and so did we. So I think we've made a lot of adult decisions trying to make it better for everybody. But right now it's different times. Times have changed, and it's just a lot of loiterers. But, you know, even watching the people work the gates over the weekend, the amount of fake IDs that were taken and the people that saw the door guys walked away, wouldn't come in, the amount of people that didn't even have IDs, and the amount of bottles that were taken off of people that were open alcohol bottles. A lot of people got quite the shock over the weekend. And we didn't tell anyone socially through media that we were even going to do this. So we wanted to make sure that that effect was out there so people showed up, and the adults are more than welcome. The people that want to hang out and sit and drink we don't want them down there. It doesn't do us any good. So there's several businesses downtown. There's, in that last hour and a half, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars that are spent in the community. That includes just not bars. It includes restaurants, some little grocery store and the food vendors, the Uber drivers, everybody. So if things change and don't get better, it'll just spiral out of control, and it's going to affect all of us. A lot of people that pay rent are going to leave. I've spoken to Kyle about it several times. I can't book any shows any more than Circuit 21 or anybody else. So every situation for every business owner is different, and that's what makes it so hard. So it's going to be tough, but I think we're all willing to take the chance and spend our money. Those fences aren't free. The guys that put them up aren't free. I mean, we're paying them out of our pockets to do it. We appreciate the help from the city, and I think it's going to hopefully gets better. And it's just going to take time to find out, because the difficult times we're living in right now is just unbelievable. So hopefully it all gets better for everybody. Thank you.
Not to show age, Kyle's been doing it for 16, 17 years. You've been doing it for 30 years.
43.
43, so.
I would like to retire, but my day's coming, but as long as I'm here, you got me. So.
But appreciate your leadership down there and working with the other owners. That's been very appreciated. It helps execute things and get some team playing going on. So. And
a lot of the owners, have stepped up to help, and a lot of them, as some of you have seen, aren't helping a lot. Mm-hmm. So, and it's just not us. The food vendors are shutting down early to help, which is, that's a lot of money out of their pockets. And just closing off the street from people driving through. I mean, the first night we had the fences up, the biggest problem was in the back parking lots where there were no street lights and it was dark. And that's where a lot of the officers ended up. So, and none of those people were coming out of businesses. They were just hanging out.
So I have a question, and I'm not sure whether this is more to the chief or to one of you gentlemen. Do we know what time the vendors shut down this past weekend?
Yeah, 1:30 was when they were supposed to be like their last call. They were cleaned up and out by 2 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah, so even the inside restaurants with the carryout food all closed early too to help out, because if you've worked a door at a nightclub, it's the one job you don't want to do.
Right.
The things people say to you and that people ask, it's no different than the officers. How they stand there and take it sometimes verbally is brutal. And I've got a lot of family members that are officers, and I hear all those war stories at home too, and I respect the heck out of them for what they're doing. It's not easy and it's not fun. But you know what?
Thank you.
Everybody says a lot of things, but boy, when they sure want them there now.
You bet.
I would like to thank you guys for working with the police department, the collaborative effort. Unless you've been in the middle of a crowd like that, a very aggressive crowd, I don't think you can fully comprehend or appreciate the danger that these officers are facing. And in that regard, I think working together, I think that we can make a difference.
Yeah. Can. I had the pleasure, of course, being down there Friday night and watching what goes on and give my 2 cents for whatever that was worth that night. So thank you. I do want to make sure that this conversation, we have enough time and everything else to talk. If there's questions out there, and I know that there may be somebody that are on the phone that would like to ask questions, but also to make sure that we're talking about the district as a whole, not just the entertainment part of it. For the most part, just to let people know, we've been talking from basically El Patron intersection, 19th, I believe, down through past the stage, all the way to by Billy Bob's, almost to 17th, get my streets right, almost to 17th, and then we're talking basically from the alley there by Icons to the alley, give or take, not quite, by Huckleberries. So that's the area that we're talking about, the changes that have happened, which we keep on using the district as a generic. The district overall is really larger than that if you look at the definition that the city has for the district. So 2 different areas we're calling the same. Right now, like I say, we're talking about the areas I just described. But the discussion tonight is that area for the most part, and it's not just for the arts and entertainment. We're talking about whether we want to privatize that tonight, if thoughts on that. We were talking about maybe any long-term plans or thoughts on who and how is the conversation tonight, not just these issues. Not to belittle these issues, but the discussion really is more broad than that.
Well,
So
I would like to make a comment regarding that, Mayor. I think that's more than we're going to get done in the next 29 minutes. I think that's a whole other study session.
It may be. We'll discuss that. But
well, I think that Kyle, you made some good commentary on how we are seeing symptoms of larger issues at play here, right? it's not just a matter of whether we close bars at 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock. It's not this, that, or the other thing. It is, the city has frankly not been able to maintain the downtown area, the entertainment area, the district, whatever we want to call it. It has not been sustainable. For years, we've had downtown ambassadors from the police force, and we had the officers doing the tavern checks with the blue uniform when I was a kid, trying to hide from them, right? All sorts of fun stuff like that. But we sort of are. It's cyclical, and there's just been underlying issues that never get resolved. Whether it be loitering during the daytime, which I know since I've been on council has been an issue brought to my ears every month, every week, every day during the summer, right? Not so much an issue during the winter. But we just have not made any progress on any of the real infrastructure. We still have streetlights out. We have lights on the alleys out. We have parking lots that are not striped so that people just pile cars in there and you don't have any idea if proper parking is maintained. I was riding my bicycle with my daughter just yesterday down in the Ped Mall, and I nearly biffed it because of just the condition of the sidewalks there, right? This is a bigger issue, and when you have someplace where it looks like nobody's taken care of, what happens, right? It's sort of the natural result. And so we need to have a much broader conversation about how do we make the downtown sustainable, because little surgical cuts, we have this timeline from May 29th to July 11th, but really, in the grand scheme of things, this is a blip of data, and we're making decisions based off of this is really tunnel visioned, in my opinion. Again, just from the 3.5 or whatever it's been years of me being on this council, we've talked about dumpsters and no progress, right? ABC stuff here, and we're not making any progress on this. And so it would be my recommendation that instead of getting into the debates as to a 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock shutdown time or something like that, we make some progress on how are we going to just make the downtown sustainable? What types of funding, revenue streams can we identify to pay for maybe, this past weekend we had 4 overtime police officers there. That seemed to help. Well, we can't just always rely on us not using our representation fund to pay for that, right? We got to identify some ways to make this sustainable, because we do have these little blips of improvement, but then we get busy, now there's this issue over here, and then it falls apart over here, right? And so we can't keep doing whack-a-mole in this city. So that's why I asked about a formal security plan for the district, the entertainment area, in those emails, that 9 questions that I sent out. I've asked about the recommendations from the West Palm Springs report about frequent offenders, mapping them out of the downtown area. I'm nervous about privatizing it to the extent of then we can just tell people that they can't be here. But I am not sympathetic to people who habitually break the rules and then just come back. And so exploring ideas like that, I think we need to be looking at this much broader. And for our city manager, we've been talking about these things for 3 years. What do we do? How do we take some of these ideas and really start making some progress? Because we've been talking about SSA, we've been talking about Business Improvement District for over a year now, and here we are with it just getting worse.
Well, so what was originally going to happen tonight was a discussion on a privatization proposal from Dari,
right,
to take this same area and essentially turn it into like if they were renting it for a festival over the weekend.
Right.
So there'd be private control over it rather than it's still city property, but essentially we're renting it out on a permanent basis.
Yeah, like a lease.
But they did not want to bring that forward until we had some of these issues resolved.
Right.
So they wanted the situation to calm down first. But I just wanted to get the approval from council that you want to bring that forward and start that discussion. They've got a lot of good ideas on how to improve things down there. And it's part of our new partnership with Dari. So we would like to bring that forward here at the next council meeting or so, just to start the discussion in that area also. And that's one step that we've talked about but have never done. And everyone kind of feels that that's really the next thing to do here.
Yeah, I think regarding the privatization, I am appreciative of the police chief's comments in the past about how, well, we're not just going to violate people's constitutional rights just because we don't like them doing it there, but through a combination of intelligent, like streetscape planning. I mean, we have issues with people are going to sit where it's comfortable, right? And so let's think about that when we design the street, right? So by creative streetscape and things like that, and actually figuring out how we're going to pay to change some of the streetscape that constantly is attracting the same problem it has been for 3 years, something like that, plus addressing the frequent flyers. I mean, I don't think it's fair to the business owners, to everyone else downtown trying to enjoy their lunch, that the same guy who passes out drunk in the bushes is there every day, right? I mean, that's not fair to everyone else. So that's my opinion on the privatization discussion, is balancing the personal rights that people have for being in public spaces, but at the same time addressing the obscene offenses to everyone else's rights.
Yeah, real quick, I'd like to get some of the people that are here virtually. Jennifer Swanson, Alderman Swanson, would you like to give you some thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, so I am in favor of the privatization. I think something has to be done with that whole situation down there on the plaza that's a sustainable thing. I mean, for Ward 4, I really don't want to spend my representation fund on the district because that is not where my focus is at. And it's not fair to the people in Ward 4 to have that money diverted down there. However, I do agree that because of the issues that we've had, it does take a precedent right now. And so it is important at this current time to have that. And I appreciate the fact that, the sidewalks are bad. They're bad all over the city. It's not just down in the district. But I would like to pursue the conversation of working towards privatization, because I think once it becomes private, then I think the bar owners and whoever owns it, Dari, whoever's down there, is going to have a little bit more substance to be able to get the undesirables out, more so than the city's really going to be able to do.
Okay. Alderman Spaghettis.
I guess the first thing I would say is I agree with Alderwoman Swanson about the use of our representation funds. I would rather save those for ward activities and things that improve our individual wards. Money for the district can be found elsewhere, in my opinion. The only other thing I really have to say is I would look forward to seeing or hearing some of the suggestions or ideas that Dari has before I weigh into the matter any further.
Okay. Alderman Geenan.
I don't have anything to add other than what's been shared.
Okay. Alderman Clark.
Yes, I would agree with having someone else do it. They might have more ideas, more resources than we have to make it better, and that we just stop running in a circle trying to figure this thing out. Obviously, we're not doing the best at it, so let someone else get a chance.
Okay. Alderman Poulos. Go ahead.
No, I guess I would not be opposed to using our representation funds. We are in a unique situation right now with our overall budget, and that was one area where we did have some extra money, so I'm not opposed to it. I can understand what my colleagues are feeling, but from my perspective, I thought it was money well spent.
And privatization?
I would like to learn more about it.
Okay.
Before I make a commitment one way or the other. I see benefits in it, but I also see the benefits of having it as is.
Alderman Burt.
I was under the impression that the funds that were covering the additional, the police officer funding for the next couple of weeks were coming out of a different fund than representation. Can you clarify?
Yeah, they're not coming out of the representation fund. I think the question from the mayor was if that were a funding source we needed to tap, could we?
Correct.
Currently, we have not tapped that funding source.
Correct.
Oh, I apologize. This is Ivory. I'm sorry, Alderman Hurt. I am willing to give my funds up for that process. No, since we are, like Alderwoman Swanson said, we're in a situation here where we have to do some things different. So at this time, I would say yes to that. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that part of the question.
No, you're fine. You're fine. But it may be the fireworks. It may be something else. But that's
correct.
right. But it was his options. Just whether we could look at that is at one of the places.
Bottom line is, though, those funds are only going so far. Then who's going to pick up that cost going forward? Right. The bars, or I don't know where this is coming from, but someone else is going to have to kind of, I've heard rumblings of, we don't want to pay to have the police down here from other, not particularly these two, but so at some point the bar owner is going to have a little bit more into the game if they want that kind of protection down there. But I mean, it's not up to city council to spend their representation fund to bail out the security downtown. My last comment about privatization, I would probably agree. I would like to get a little bit more information on it, and but I would say we definitely need to keep it safe, because if we don't create a safe atmosphere down there and we're not showing up on the news every weekend, no one's going to want to come down there and make that a place to go. So in the short term, the safety of the downtown is the short term. Long term, obviously, we need to look at revitalizing the area. I understand that. So that's what I've got.
And I don't mean to cut this somewhat short. We do have another topic if we want to get to it, but was there any further questions real quick from the chief on his data? He worked quite hard and put some time into that data. Is there any questions for the chief on that? Not hearing any.
If I could add something real quick, Mayor.
Yes, you can.
I know that I came out with a very strong position. I certainly support the district and the bar owners. I think we have some quality, not just bar owners, but business owners down there that understand what the dynamics are and what the problem are, at least from our perspective. And they do want to see change that would benefit the district. So I am certainly open to the council's direction to look more at privatization and seeing what potential benefits that there could be there. But I also say that there has to come a time that if some of these other new measures are not working, I can simply go back to the data for 20, 30 years. Mark can go back further than me and can say that this we know has consistently been the peak of activity and the demand on police services. And yes, we're looking at a very small window right now. But the bigger picture is this is the same dynamics that we're dealing with to a certain degree. But again, I say that the dynamics have changed into what we're dealing with as far as the mentality, the hostility. And I hope that is just a small window in time here and that changes. But should it not, or we're going to continue to deal with loiterers and big crowds and the issues that come with it, there has to be something else that is looked at beyond this. So I do want to be supportive of the businesses in the district, and I would like to see it turn around. By all means, that's what we want to see, a nice, safe atmosphere for people to come enjoy. But we can't keep continuing to put these demands on the police department to basically try and see this through when we're so challenged with where we're at right now. So I guess that's how I'll close. So.
Appreciate your sympathy and understanding their side, and I know that they are of yours also. When I've talked to them, it's not gone unheard on your staffing levels and cost and that sort of thing. By no means. I think they understand the best that they can and are wanting to work with that also. So not just with these two. I've sat and talked to most of them, and they do understand and are sympathetic to that, and want to help that out too. Accolades to everybody, but and keep talking about it. I don't want to waste time on that, but same token is that this has been very dynamic, changing, and it'll continue to change until we get the right formula, and everybody understands that we can't just be stagnant. We've got to try to find that right formula. For now, that formula can change 6 months from now or a year from now or whatever, and that's what we've got to be more adaptive to, at least in my opinion. And I agree with Dylan Parker's comments that we need to make sure we look at global things down there too, not just this. All right, I hate to cut it off unless anybody's got really something that they really want to make sure that they get on the record or speak.
Well, so we only have really 3 minutes now before we need to take a break. So I would say postpone the next item until the next study session, and then if you have some more comments here and you want to make them, you've got a little bit of time. That's up to the council, though.
That's
whatever you want to do.
Could I?
Yes.
Well, this is a pretty detailed question, but do you want to take up the next 2 minutes talking about this subject?
We can finish, and we'll drop that topic. That's correct, and come back with it. We can do a couple more minutes with this.
Well, the matter of bouncers repeatedly gets brought up, and I keep on hearing conflicting information from everyone as to what the city requires of, let's just leave it to bars with 3 a.m. licenses, right? Not citywide, but 3 a.m. licensed bars, as most, if not all, of our Ped Mall bars are. What requirements does our liquor code require of them with respect to security? They got to have a security camera system operational, right? And the latest thing is that we do not require them to have bouncers.
No. Go ahead, Terry.
There is a city ordinance that the bars that are open until 3 are supposed to have paid, trained, licensed doormen. We don't call them bouncers, we call them greeters.
Excuse me, greeters? Doormen.
Sorry.
He tried to correct me that the other night, and I didn't pick up on it.
Well,
greeters. But yes, go ahead.
Yes, they're supposed to have them.
Well, that's not the information that I'm getting from staff. So can somebody please clarify this?
And I'm trying to find it here. I'm not playing on my phone. I'm trying to find, there was Linda researched and I think found part of the ordinance that didn't specifically say greeters or doormen, but it talked about the responsibility of the, and I think you were sent that.
Section 3-11, operation. No licensee hereunder shall allow any loitering, gathering of unruly individuals or crowds, or any unlawful or dangerous behavior, whether in the premises or in any parking lot or other adjacent area serving the premises, and the licensee shall have the primary responsibility for hiring such security personnel and taking other appropriate measure to observe compliance with the subsection. In the event a violation of law has taken place, the licensee or his agents shall immediately notify the police. So we don't specifically spell out you got to have one greeter per 30 guests or whatever. Just we say it's your responsibility to make it safe.
They're required. Well, I guess the answer to that is what you cited is disorderly conduct on premise, a violation of the liquor code.
Right.
I think one of the aggravating factors you would find is if they had inadequate security for the nature of their business or event or whatever it may be. If you have 300-400 people packed into an establishment and you have no doorman and there's problems, I think the Liquor Commission can look at that and say you've failed to meet your obligation to provide adequate security. I think the only formalized training that I'm aware of that the city requires liquor license servers, and I don't remember the acronym for the program. Is it ABATE or something? Bassett. It was TIPS. It was Bassett now. So I think that has to do with service of alcohol, but I think that's the only required training. There's no requirement for doormen unless you look at it from the violation standpoint of something occurred, did they have adequate security on premise?
So it's not so much a front-end requirement on our part to say that you have to have X number of greeters, but more so if something happens at their establishment and we determine that they did not sufficiently, they didn't have enough security there, then they can get in trouble with the liquor commission.
Yes, the Liquor Commission would make that determination.
Okay, that clarifies things.
Okay.
Just making sure, and that includes patios. What it doesn't is, and everyone's different how they run their business, but I don't let my doorman go to parking lots to help break up fights. The only time I've ever done it is to back up a police officer. Some of them tend to run around, some of them don't. I tell my guys, you go a block away, my insurance is going to cover it. So,
Yeah.
you know, unless there's an officer in trouble and you're going to knock some guy down, go for it. But otherwise, stay close to home. I don't want you roaming all over the plaza. Because that's an insurance issue.
Okay.
With regard to privatization now, if your doorman, if that's all privatized, then your doormen are going to, their responsibility is going to end at your door, or is it going to continue out into the?
That's a devil of the detail that needs to be worked on.
That's what hasn't been worked out yet. That's what's part of the follow-on discussions on how would we work that out? What would it look like?
And those discussions are not just, and those discussions are not just with us, it's also with the owners who are down there also. But is there any questions on the people that are here virtually? Got to make sure you don't get cut short. Anybody out there virtually have, okay, just want to make sure. Anybody got you? So it is time to move on, to adjourn this part of it and take a quick break and then start the city council. So thank you, everybody.
I'm going to disappear under the table.